All right, so thanks for being with us here today for our, actually the first ever GWN7000 training webinar. The GWN7000 is the router in our GWN series. Moving forward, we will have additional routers in addition to the GWN7000, but this is what we have for now, and you'll see that the web user interface, the features, functionalities of our routers going forward will be pretty much similar to the 7000, especially in terms of how you set up and manage the device, which is what you're all here to learn today. Some of the routers going forward will just be a little bit more powerful, maybe potentially a little bit less powerful to give us some mid-range, high-end, and lower-end routers. So, before we get going, just kind of want to give you a brief overview of the GWN series of access points and routers. Many of you were probably with us for yesterday's webinar, which focused on the access points. So you see the access points here on the screen. This is about as much as we're going to talk about them in detail here today. It's going to be a focus mainly on the GWN7000. So currently within our GWN series, we have these three devices you see here on the screen. The GWN7610, that was the first access point we came out with. GWN7600, which was launched about 3 months ago, and the GWN7000, the router, which was also launched about 3 months ago. So I'm sure many of you, hopefully I guess have been following or know Grandstream for a while. Its expansion, I'll call it, into the networking solutions industry is one of the biggest expansions of Grandstream in our company's history. As you know, and as I'm sure you've seen over the years, our mission is to provide complete business communication solutions all under one brand, under one name, optimized to work together, and that is exactly why we got into IP PBXs, why we got into video conferencing, video surveillance, etc. In addition to our VoIP products, and now we're adding another great product, another great service that our partners and resellers can offer to their customers here with networking equipment. So the 7610 supports 250 clients, 1.75 gigs per second of wireless throughput, and 175 meter range. In comparison to the GWN7600, the GWN7600 will offer you support for more clients. As you see there, 450 plus clients, but slightly slower speeds, 1.27 gigabits per second. So the way I like to break this down is if speed is most important to you, if you need to offer the fastest possible connections you can offer, you want the 7610. If you need to support, if you're more focused on being able to support a lot of different clients, a lot of different people, which is common in restaurants, hotels, convention centers, etc., office buildings, or some office buildings, then the GWN7600 is for you. And then we get into our GWN7000, the router that pairs with both of the access points we have now and all the ones that we will have in the future. One thing that I do like to mention, even though it kind of, obviously works a little bit against our 7000 here, is that all of our access points will be compatible with any third-party router. We have just built in some, just like our UCM series of PBXs, some additional features and functionality, like the embedded controller, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, into our GWN7000, which gives you some really good reasons to use our access points with our routers, but our APs will be compatible with any third-party router. The GWN7600, LR. This is a product that is currently in beta. Just kind of like to flash it up here on the screen. So to give you, to kind of prove to you that there are a lot of additional products in this GWN series that are in the pipeline. This is our first ever long-range outdoor access point made with the IP66 certified weatherproof casing, ideal for use in any outdoor conditions. It's been tested from negative 30 degrees Celsius all the way up to 60 degrees Celsius, Wi-Fi coverage range of 275 meters. So again, our first ever outdoor long-range Wi-Fi access point. This is currently in the beta club. I believe that we haven't even gotten the units out yet to beta testers to begin testing. So the safe bet on this product is to expect it at the end of August or the beginning of September for official announcement where you can purchase it. All right, so let's get to the router, which we're here to focus on today. Our GWN7000 is an enterprise-grade multi-WAN gigabit VPN router provides full VPN functionality in addition to the ability to, obviously, to set up and manage entire wired, wireless, or VPN networks. It's got an embedded provisioning controller. Those of you that have been with us for previous GWN webinars, you know I talk about this embedded controller a lot. I could go on for a while about it, so I'm going to save it to the slide that I have dedicated for it. But basically, with our routers and with our access points, we are making setting up networks, especially Wi-Fi networks, easier, quicker, more intuitive than ever before because of this controller that we put right into the user interface of all these products to allow any of our GWN products to set up and manage entire networks. We'll come back to that a little bit later. We talked about VPN. We support pretty much all the major VPN flavors, including OpenVPN. Support speeds all the way up to 300 megabits per second in terms of VPN. The device gives you 1 million packets per second routing and 10 gigabits per second in switching power, obviously in coordination with the access points and whatnot, other devices on the network. Excuse me. I believe I have a slide for this coming up. 3G, 4G, LTE wireless backup options. It's got a couple of USB ports, which also allows you to integrate wireless printer services, wireless file sharing services, network attached storage, etc., etc. So all in all, this GWN7000 gives you basically a centralized interface to monitor, provision, set up, manage entire networks of Wi-Fi access points, as well as to facilitate wired networks throughout your business. Gives you 7 gigabit ports, has built-in firewall options, which is a great feature. We mentioned the multi-WAN. Does have built-in load balancing and failover just to maximize network reliability. We talked about the 1 million packets per second and the 10 gigs per second. We also talked about the support for the various VPN flavors. In terms of specs, I'll throw this up here, see if there's anything here that I didn't mention. Firewall, USB, VPN. Does have two, we mentioned the USB ports, the reset pin, and we'll come back and talk about the auto provisioning capabilities here in just a second. Just like our access points, which we talked about yesterday, our routers will be able to support any Wi-Fi standard to be able to give out any Wi-Fi standards. So if you might be using, so the example here that I'll give for the router, maybe you're looking, you have a bunch of access points deployed and you need to replace the router, and you're looking at our GWN7000. If your access points are older access points that might run on an older standard, like one of the ones you see here on the screen, we will be able to fully support and extend those networks and facilitate those networks out to those access points. But just in general, it's always good to know that with our access points and routers, we do pretty much support any Wi-Fi standard, pretty much backwards compatible to support all of the older standards, including in addition to the new one, and obviously full support for dual band networks. All right, so I talked about the controllerless management, the embedded controllers, a bunch of terms that we toss around to explain this. And this visual here, in my opinion, gives you the best indication of what we're talking about. So traditionally, the way that Wi-Fi networks, access points, etc., were set up is that you had a separate piece of equipment or software known as a controller. Oftentimes, this had to be purchased separately, and that controller basically had to talk one-on-one with each access point. So you have to touch each access point individually. You have to go back to the controller, use that controller to manage each individual access point. So not only are you sometimes having to buy separate software or hardware to actually set up or provision your network, it's not included with a lot of other manufacturers, but it takes you longer to do so because you have to basically talk to each Wi-Fi access point individually. What we have done is we have built that entire controller functionality, software, etc., everything that a controller would do. So full setup, provisioning, and ongoing management of any network. All of that is built right into the user interface for our access points or for our router. So what that means is with any one of our access points or any GWN7000, you can set up, manage, provision, create networks, divvy out networks to various access points, do all of that from one centralized location, which would be the web user interface of either the router that you're using in this capacity or the access point that you're using in this capacity. Our access points at the moment support, I'll give you the ability to set up and manage either 30 or 50 other Grandstream Wi-Fi access points. And this is where the router is super powerful, especially if you're using it with our access points. It's able to set up and manage, it's either, we say 300, I believe it's closer to 500, so somewhere in the range of 300 to 500 access points can be set up, provisioned, managed, all from one central location here, which would be the user interface of the GWN7000 router. You see a screenshot here of the home screen of the web user interface. Let's see if I can, it's a little bit too small so I can't read it, but on the side you would have a section where you would go to access points and actually be able to see all the access points that are on the same network, that can be paired, or that are already paired. But in addition to that, this gives you a centralized management interface to basically monitor and control an entire network right here from the 7000's web user interface. Status monitoring dashboard right here immediately when you log in, giving you the ability to automatically provision, automatically discover, automatically add access points to it, to create networks, to divvy those networks out to your access points, while also being able to obviously facilitate wired networks and VPNs. Last couple of slides here before we move into the technical part of the training, which will be run by Fareed, who I'm sure many of you have attended webinars that he has run before. So to begin to wrap up the 7000, and we will move into the technical training where we'll actually show you how to set up and manage and take advantage of all these great features with this router, and give you basically a full demo of its interface. So to kind of wrap that up, we talked a lot about VPNs. VPNs are obviously great to be able to share common networks, common network resources across two different physical locations. Maybe a business has multiple locations across the country, across the city, across the town, across the world, what have you. This gives you the ability to share networks, to offer common network resources to employees or to everybody in multiple different physical locations. And as I mentioned, we support all the major VPN flavors, including OpenVPN. All right, so we went through this yesterday. I'm just going to touch on it real fast. It's, I like to kind of go into the training this way because it kind of gives you an idea of different ways that these can actually be deployed in addition to just the features which we've talked about here. So kind of three ends of the spectrum: small office, multiple floor office, and then multiple location office. Here with the small office, this could be also extended to retail store, et cetera, et cetera. The common deployment here is that you're going to have the same network or the same SSID and the same access credentials given out to all of the access points, all the Grandstream access points paired to the GWN7000. This gives anybody in this office or retail store or whatnot the ability to move from one side of the office to the other without losing a Wi-Fi connection. When they go out of range of one access point and into range of the other access point, they will just switch from one access point to the next. There'll be no disruption in service, and there'll be no need to sign in. So that's pretty much the common deployment scenario for a small office. When you get to multiple floor offices, you're starting to talk about many different access points with many different networks, the ability to put access points all over the place, to have your GWN7000 automatically discover and provision those, and then to give you the ability to offer various networks on each one. You can build networks specifically for each department, for guest areas, for your sales team, for your marketing team, for your support team, for your executives, for your consultants, whatnot. To have dedicated networks for all of those, but have all of those networks being transmitted by the same access points or the same groups of access points, as our APs can offer and support up to 16 different SSIDs or wireless networks per device. And then the far end of the spectrum, the multiple branch office, and this is talking about VPNs, which we pretty much just talked about, giving you the ability to create a VPN tunnel between two different offices and two different locations. Again, the ability to share network resources, and the VPN tunnel between those two locations can then be, at each location, transmitted out through Wi-Fi access points as a wireless VPN. All All right, so that wraps up my introduction. Bear with us here for just a second. We will move into the technical part of the training, which I would imagine will probably run maybe around 45 minutes or so, give or take, just to give you an idea of how long it'll take to go through that. So bear with us here for a second. I'm going to transfer the presentation over to Fareed, who's going to take you through the rest of today's training.
All right, thank you, Phil, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for this technical webinar about the GWN7000 router. So as Phil mentioned, yesterday we did a webinar about the access points just by themselves. That would be useful for those of you who don't have a GWN7000, the router. That means you're using the Grandstream APs with any third-party router as the DHCP server. Today, we will look at our GWN7000 router. Phil went through the different specs, the different slides that showed you the different specs of the GWN router. I will be attempting to step you guys through or show you the different parameters where they belong. We'll try to create some things that you can do on the router, such as VPN connection. We will create certificates to secure that. We will show you how you can now add and manage the access points directly from the GWN7000 router versus using one of the access points as the master. So this is what we briefly mentioned it yesterday. Here's your overview, your dashboard of the router. As you can see, I have two WAN connections. I put this router directly on two public IP addresses on both WAN connections, WAN ports. I see some traffic on the two interfaces. I don't have anything on the wireless side, so I did discover two APs in this network. None of them is online. I have not added anything. I'm just waiting to start the presentation so we can add them together and demo that. No clients, no channel distribution yet because I have not added the IPs yet. Let's go directly to the access points and show how you can discover. It looks exactly, for those of you who attended yesterday's webinar, it's the same controller interface as the master access point. And let's go ahead and hit discover APs. And here I can see two of them, two APs in the network, the GWN7610, which is the Wave 2. I'm sorry, the regular, just the 3x3 access point, and then the Wave 2, the 2x2 7600. You've got the MAC addresses, you've got the IP addresses, and as well as the firmware version. As you can see, I'm using the latest official firmware on the website. I showed you the trick yesterday. You can access now the AP from using the IP address, but be careful if you access it, it will become the master, and then you won't be able to provision it anymore from the GWN7000 from the router. That's not the goal of today's presentation. We already did that yesterday. So let's just add them, provision them, and manage them from the router. Let's start with the first one. Just hit on the link. It should go down, and then add the second one. No more discoverable devices. We're done. And here you go with two devices being provisioned. Let's give them a few seconds for the controller to configure them as slaves. Now, note, if I try to access any of these access points after they are added to the router, none of them is accessible. If I go, oh, actually, I'm on a different network. I'm accessing this router from the WAN. So if I were on that local network, I won't be able to access this access point because it's already been provisioned by the router. Okay, so look at the warning. that's telling you, of course, you just add the 2 access points, but these access points are not a member of any network group. So we explained yesterday that we work with network groups. So a network group can be linked to a WAN membership, to WAN 1 or WAN 2 for the WAN connection. A network group can be linked to a Wi-Fi network as well. So we're just working with this network group logic. So try to get used to it. All right, we will add these to network groups. We will assign them probably to just network group 0, which is the default one. Let's actually show what else you can do with this access point. So I can select both of them, and I can say upgrade. If I hit the upgrade button, what's going to happen is the GWN7000 is going to go and download the firmware from whatever path you specified in the under maintenance, and then firmware server path under upgrade. Same logic as yesterday, as master and slave. So I put a firmware server path. If I hit upgrade, that means I need to go to this path and look for the router's firmware at this path. Now, if I want to look for the AP firmware at this path, I need to come back to my access points and then say, select both of them and then hit the upgrade button. There's nothing to be done. Both of them are on the latest firmware. So it's just going to say you're on the latest official firmware. If I hit the upgrade button, I don't want to waste time on that. I can reboot both of them, and then I can add them to a network group. It's just going to ask me whether I want to add them to group 0 or group 1. I can actually group them in group 0 for now, and that's it. Need to apply changes, but before that, maybe I wanna do additional configuration. I would say I give this first one. I give it a name. I call it just the wave 2. It's the 7610. Should be right. Yep. So that's not the wave 2. This is the wave 2. Just call it wave 1. The wave 1, and then dual band frequency, and then enable band steering. We talked about band steering for APs yesterday, so it just allows you to get the advantage of the high speed for the 5 gig hosts in your network, while having the 2.4 other clients in the same network. So you don't want the access points to be transmitting at the 2.4 gigahertz speed, so you want to take advantage of the higher speed that's for the 5 gig band clients. Save. Let's configure the other one, and this one we will call it wave 2. Okay, that's all I'm doing. Actually, I needed to select device name wave 1. All right, always apply the changes and reload your controller. And so we know these 2 access points now are part of the same network group. Let's go to network group 0 and see what it's got. So network group 0, disregard group 1 for now. It's got membership. It belongs, well, not it belongs, but it just has a WAN membership of port 1. I happen to create another one, group 1, which I linked to port number 2. So when you do a port forwarding or whatever traffic rules you're trying to accomplish, you say group 2, that means WAN 2. Actually, group 1, which is WAN 2. Group 0 is port 1, WAN 1. And they give you, and then LAN membership, now we can send it to LAN 0. Okay. Let's edit our group 0. Let's actually get rid of group 1. We're just going to work with group 0 for now. edit. So we said group 0 is WAN1. This is the DHCP. It's going to give you IP addresses in this range, 192.168.1, something. And the Wi-Fi is configured as GWN webinar. Let's add it 6 June 14. And then enable Wi-Fi is enabled. Password is password. And then we choose the different encryption keys, AES. And then we use the pre-shared key for the the key mode. Okay. Same thing as yesterday. We talked about client isolation. This is when you create your guest network. We can briefly do it again. So the guest clients can only access the internet. And let's go to the device membership. Now, which access points will be part of this Wi-Fi network for group 1? We can say it's wave 1 and wave 2, both of them, or I can just say wave 1 and then I can put wave 2 for another network. Well, let's just put both of them. And after we apply the changes, we will see if we can actually, my computer is so far away. These devices are sitting at the other end of the building in my lap, but I should be able to get some signal. Let's give it some time. Not sure if I can get it from here, but we'll give it some time. All right, so look that I did not specify any LAN membership for this network group, but you can always do it. Okay, let's see if I'm missing anything. If you're creating a guest network, you're just going to go to Additional Ss Ids and then say Additional Ss Id and say Webinar Guest. And then group 0 always, you can put it on group 2, which will, you'll route traffic on the, if I create WAN1, let's actually do it. That's a good idea. Let's go back to network groups and create a new network group with a new WAN port. We choose WAN2, enable, and then call it group 1, and that's all I needed. I can do LAN membership, LAN 0, or I can just, it doesn't matter. This is for the LAN side. We can do VLAN or we can delete VLANs if you have a switch with VLANs. Let's do enable Wi-Fi. SSID is guest. That's the guest network. Pre-shared key guest 1, 2, 3. And device membership, we can just put the wave 1 to do the guest network. Okay. It says I need to enable the internet protocol, of course. Right here. And notice that this is a new, this is just an IP address and a different than the default group 0 IP addressing. Okay, let's do it LAN 0 then. Okay. All right, let's enable the VLANs. It requires VLAN for this type of. All right, now I've got my guest network configured there. That's basically everything we did even yesterday by having one of the access points as the controller, as the master. And you could do everything we did so far without the router, because the first access point that you access can have that. So this is my network, and then I should see the guest one coming soon. Maybe the guest one, because it's only one access point, I'm not able to see it, but it's fine. All right, you can also add additional SSIDs if you want. If you create more than 2 networks, it's really up to you. All right, that's kind of like the Wi-Fi part of it, and as you can see, it's already assigned channel for the APs, and now my 2 access points are online, and nothing is connected to them, but wirelessly we can connect the computer, and you should be able to see it here. Let's go. Well, there are things that we mentioned yesterday, like a landing page for the access points for the users to authenticate in, but that's actually part of the AP training that we did yesterday. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that today. So let's see what we have on the router. Status of the router, it just shows you the WAN status, the WAN ports. As you can see, I gave static public IP addresses, and I'm actually connecting through the WAN port, which is disabled by default. How was I able to connect through the WAN port of the router is by creating a firewall traffic rule that allows me to connect. So I created the WAN access rule, and all it is I'm allowing any traffic from any source IP from any source port to port 443, which is the HTTPS port of the router. That's all I did, and here it's giving me access. On the WAN 2, I just created a rule that allows SSH, which is not actually supported, I believe, on the router, but I'm forwarding this port using static NAT to another device sitting behind the router, so I can access that server through SSH, and that's done from the advanced settings. And I just created static route. I deleted it, but all it is you create, just say server SSH, so I can access it, enable, and then I can say any or IPv4, and then I choose, let's think about this. We could use it on group 0 through WAN 2, and then source IP could be any, or I can specify, actually the source port is the WAN port, so 72.85.255. What was it? 203, 201, and then I rewrite the IP, and then the source port could be 22, rewrite 22, destination IP is whatever, it should be a local IP, 22.1, actually 1.1.115, that's the server, that's the IP I got for the server, and 22, so I'm doing SSH for 22 to 22. Now, with this static route rule, I can access this device, the server that has that local IP I specified using this public IP of the router. Apply my changes. You can also see the dynamic NAT if you want to do any dynamic NATing. Okay. So let me come back to my port, and I can see how I configured the WAN IP to be a static one, and I gave it a static public IP address. Same thing for WAN 2. It looks similar. It's from the same ISP from Verizon. Okay, and I give it a static IP so it doesn't change. And I only enabled WAN access to manage the router remotely from the WAN port, WAN number 1. Tunnel, there is no tunneling right now. I have not created any VPNs to connect out to another open VPN or L2PP server. So there is no, I don't see any tunneling right now, but once you create via VPN, you should be able to see it. LAN port, this is an isolated port. It's called LAN 1. You just need to enable it. That's why before, when I was trying to add it, it said that it wasn't enabled. Now I should be able to route traffic on WAN 1 to LAN 1. So this is just an isolated port that you can use for VoIP on a specific WAN interface. So this is a LAN interface, and then when you create your network groups, you can link it kind of to the WAN 2. So it's an ISO. This is a labeled port on the router. So if you look at the back of the router, you will see this port, and you can just use it for VoIP or for any function that you would like. Global settings, this is where you can set the two interfaces, the WAN interfaces, load balancer or failover or load balancer plus failover. And then you say the primary one is WAN 1, and then whenever it fails, it's going to fail over the WAN 2. Port mirroring, if you're doing any troubleshooting, on, let's say you have a phone plugged into port number 1, you want to capture traffic using Wireshark on your PC, and your PC is plugged into LAN 2. So you would mirror incoming and outgoing traffic on port 1, and you want to capture it on port 2. That's all there is to it. And you save. Static routes, you can say, so if you want to go directly, you want to create a static route for a network group to destination. Let's say we know that network group is WAN 1, group 1 is WAN 2. So let's say when I go to this, let's just call it name VoIP that I'm just making up. An ITSP here, and then enable, and then they say group 1, the target network for VoIP.ca, their IP is, for example, this, and then I put the net mask 255.0. So the gateway, I put my gateway, so we know for it's 2.1 on WAN 2. And then you put the metric. So you're creating a static route to this, going through the WAN, always go through the WAN to that destination. QoS, there's no way we can demo this, but you can just read about this. You have to have a network that accommodates this feature. So you just create, name, priority you want to give on which interface, and then you can limit the upstream. Let's say your kids are eating up a lot of bandwidth with their Xbox, so you wanna just to limit the upstream or the downstream. It's actually the downstream both. If they are playing online, so it affects both streams. So you can limit that to whatever number of megabits that you want to assign to that. Dynamic DNS, just need to enable it, and you choose one of these companies depending on which one you're using. I had complaints that we need to support noip.com, which is different from the Polish one, noip.pl, and we should have that pretty soon. For security reasons, I know I'm anticipating a question, can I have a custom DNS? For security reasons, we cannot do that. So if you have any recommendations for other companies besides these, dynamic DNS, change IP, just let us know via the ticket. We will be more than happy to open a feature request and implement it. And then you go with your domain that's created by dynamic DNS, and then username, password, and then you choose the interface on which one, and you are done. Access points, we covered this. These are just the different clients that you have discovered. You should see anything that's connected to your LAN ports or wirelessly to the access points that are being provisioned by this router. Let's just give the network service some time to reload. I made so many changes, but I have not applied them. So as you can see, we added the access points, but we did not connect wirelessly, and there is nothing wirelessly connected to this. So that's why I don't see anything. Let's move on to VPN. Very exciting topic. Security, connect remotely. You can have this router connect. We can have a UCM if you're using the UCM or any type of IP-PBX. You can put it behind this router, and then have the phones, instead of connecting directly to the UCM, you can VPN into the this GWN router and have the phones registered to the UCM or to the PBX. So first of all, you need to create the VPN, the OpenVPN server connection name. So I created one. I can just edit it and show you what it is. So I created this one called Boston, and it works the server mode. You know, the security server mode is SSL. So we need to create certificates. So remember, in the phone, you need to issue certificates to the phone to be used for authentication. You need to have a certificate authority, a CA, and then you need to issue a server certificate that will be used by the server, and then you have to send the key to the client, which is the phone, to connect with OpenVPN. That's if you want to use SSL. You can use user authentication, it's just username and password, or you can use both, which is even stronger, or you can use a pre-shared key. Pre-shared key is symmetric. SSL is asymmetric. So let's use SSL, which is probably the most complicated one. I'm sure you can figure out the username and password. It's as simple as username and password and create VPN connection, but it's not supported by the phone. So OpenVPN is what's supported by the phone with, and our phones is, let me just disconnect here. Our phones support OpenVPN, and you can upload the certificates to them. Okay, I got a certificate authority, I got a server certificate. Where did I get these? Let's exit out of here and go to the certificates and see where I created them. System settings, certificate manager. Okay, I created a CA, certificate authority. I called it Boston Support, self-signed, self-issued. I can just probably, well, you can just download it if you want, or we can just create another one just for you to see how I created it. So let's create, this is for the webinar. I use the default SHA algorithm, 256 key, and the key length, you can choose whichever you want. Keep it as default. Lifetime 1800 days, US, Massachusetts, Boston, organization, Grandstream, PS, email address. I can just put any email address, save. And I created another one. So we're going to be using this one as our CA, certificate authority. This is the one, when the phone connects, it will tell the phone, this is indeed this IP address, this server. So don't worry, you can connect. You can trust the certificate. You can trust this server. Now for the server, for the certificates, I created the client one that will be used on the phone, and then the server that will be used by the server. So the client, the phone, I will have to move these certificates so you've got the key and the certificate and the key. So how did I create this? Let's just create one. So the server one, I'm going to call it server 1 because I already have one that's called, so actually I called it support. Let's just call it server. This is the server certificate. When you create in a certificate, it tells you, are you creating for this particular UCM, the GWN, or for a client? Let's just create a client one because the server, I already have one. Client, now I have username Ernesto because he's the only user I have on this GWN. So, and I already created the client certificate for it. If I want to create another one, I have to go to users and create a new user, a new client. So let's go to users. Let's go to users. I have Ernesto here. Let's create a new user that's called Phil. And then username Phil123, password Phil123. This is in case you want to connect username and password, and then IP appreciate key, I guess you can just save. Okay, so now I can go back to my certificate manager and then issue a new certificate for that user. So go back to certificates. Now I can do the same thing for Phil, same thing I did for Ernesto. Let's create our new Phil certificate. Not sure if it takes apostrophes. Phil cert. I can just delete it. And the CA is still the same. I use the CA certificate authority that I created, and I called it Boston Support. Server, I keep, now I'm creating a client certificate for Phil, not Ernesto. Ernesto has already one. I already sent this to Ernesto, and he has his certificates to connect his phone to the server. Now I do the same thing for Phil. The key length, I keep it 512. Algorithm digest, algorithm SHA 256. Same expiration, 1800. Massachusetts, city, same thing, Boston, GS. And email address, I could put their email address, but that's fine. Creation failed, same email address, you're right. I just put Phil at mycompany.com. What's the reason? Something's wrong. Oh, it changes. All right. So let's just use Ernesto as the example. So we download these certificates, which I already did. And this is a remote network, even though it's physically local. So I can go to this phone right here, and I'll show you how you can connect to that VPN server, which I already have ready. So you go to OpenVPN client, and then I connect to my server, GWN, that's the IP. That's the IP. I say OpenVPN enabled, yes. And then the port by default for OpenVPN is 1194 UDP. And then remember, I have the CA that I can just download. I already did. OpenVPN certificates, that's the one for Ernesto for the user, and then his key for Ernesto, same thing. So you upload the CA, which I have here. And I already uploaded it. That's the I downloaded from the server. I did it 2 days ago. That's the same one I showed you. And then when I look, don't have to upload it again. The certificate is the .cert. Remember, the client has 2 certificates. Upload, choose the file, and let's look and download Ernesto.cert. And here it is. That's the one I downloaded right now, Ernesto.cert. And now the last one is Ernesto.key, which is the, and sure enough, I should have it in my downloads folder. Ernesto.key, it's this one, and then I just upload it. But I already did. That's all you need from the client side to connect securely to the OpenVPN server. You save and apply, and then you apply changes. And how can you tell that the phone is securely connected? Obviously, you can go back to the GWN and check the logs, but if you go to the status of the phone, network status, sure enough, you have an OpenVPN IP that you obtained from the router. And where did this network come from? I actually forget to show you. When I created the OpenVPN connection, I set the IP addresses there. So OpenVPN, the one that I called Boston, and this is the IP addresses /24. So you have to choose a range or subnet of IP addresses you will be assigning to clients connecting remotely. So my phone got 1.10.0.0.6 right here, as you can see. All right, and that's it. So for the phone, just to give you some additional details, if you want to connect, because now you have a local interface of the phone and you have the VPN interface of the phone. So if you want to, when you register, you want to register through the tunnel interface, which is the VPN interface, you've got to go to settings, or actually network. Let's check both. I think it's network basic, where you can say I want to connect through basic settings. Just allow me a few seconds here to find it. Or settings general. Should be a way where it says NAT. I want to connect through the interface account. Let's check in the network settings. And here you go. So the NAT traversal for that account, for account number 1, you want to go out of the VPN interface, not the local. If you set it to no, then you're using the default, which is the local interface. Okay. Same thing, just you can create. This is not a server L2TP IPsec, so this is just a client. So you need to have a server that supports this as of today. But we're working on the L2TP IPsec server to be supported on the GWN. We do support also point-to-point. So I briefly mentioned some of the firewall rules and port forwarding. This is port forwarding. So if I want to access a device that's sitting behind this router, let's say you have a UCM, I enable, let's say I want to enable the UDP, the 5060 default SIP port through WAN1, and then I say source port is 5060. And group 0, UCM is in group 0 or group 1. So let's just change it to WAN2. And destination IP is 5060 destination port. Sorry, this is whatever IP it will get, 2.something, 2.10, for example. And the port is 5060. And then save that. Now you just forwarded the port 5060 for SIP. If you want to forward the RTP, for the UCM, you want to make sure when phones connect to it remotely, not through the VPN. This is not relevant to VPN. This is when you just connect via port forwarding. So let's say the RP ports. I'm not sure how to do a range. It should be just a dash. The source went to source port. Let's try a dash for the range, because the RTP you need a range of ports. That should be supported. Cool. And same thing for the range. It tells you destination port 192.168.2.10, and here you go. The field should not be empty. Doesn't look empty. All right, we just forwarded this range successfully. Now your UCM sitting behind the router can you can connect phones remotely to it, not via VPN. This is not relevant to VPN. If you were using VPN, no need to do all this. So if we were connected via VPN, then here on the phone, I'll just use the local IP address of that UCM, because it will connect to it via VPN. No need to go through the WAN interface. I did show you one of the traffic rules that I created, the one you probably need if you need WAN access, as allowing any IP, any source port to connect to port 443 via WAN1, which is what I'm doing right here. I connected to WAN1. We talked about network groups. So we did create 2 network groups. That's just our guest network. Let's add the other wave 2 access point to see if the signal will reach up here from the other end of the building. sure enough, I get both networks, guest and the webinar 614. So that's all set. And we showed you the client isolations. We said, let's say on the guest network, on the Wi-Fi, we want to isolate the clients connecting, hopping on the guest network. We want to only give them internet access so they don't ping the rest of the production network. So make sure you do that. Maintenance, we talked about upgrading. You just need to put the firmware server path, and then we will, in the near future, support local upgrades of the GWN, meaning GWN, you just download the firmware and just upload it instead of, upgrading through or via this path here. Debugging, it just shows you, any core dumps, trace route if you want to try, see if you have access, you can ping this target. And sure enough, 0 packet loss, syslogs, and then net table. You should be able to see all the translations that happened here, all the transactions. Okay, what else? File sharing. Unfortunately, this server that it's very simple. I put this server and then / to Ubuntu machine, and then I set a file share. I could connect to anything in this network group, and then I have access to that file sharing here, this server / the folder. So anybody in group 0, which I assigned, not group 1, can have access to this file share that I call GS. SNMP is also supported. User manager, we showed how we can create users so they can be given access via VPN to the GWN remotely. And then you've got the notifications. You've got the color code here depending on the severity. You've got blue, just regular stuff. It's notifying your controller online. Open VPN connection app. Here it's notifying me that after I created it, I had no issues with it. So it's up. Establish a connection to this AP. Provisioning starts for this AP. Gives you everything in detail, which is great. And then orange, anything that's connection loss, interface down. So it's medium severity, and then critical, which is red. Hopefully I have nothing right now. That's it for what I have for today. The only thing that I was not able to cover was To TP Ipsec, so you can just set up check if you have any server that you can connect to. Very simple. You just create one right here, enable it, and then give it remote server. You want to connect to WAN 1 or WAN 2, and then the server IP address. So you install one on a Linux or Windows machine, and then that server will give you username and password, and then you enter them here, and then transport tunnel, and then it will get a pre-shared key. Actually, pre-shared key that you can enter there, and that's it. That's all you need. Status says disconnected because it was not a valid IP that I included there. Well, the other thing I didn't cover was dynamic NAT, which is very similar to static NAT, which is one public to one IP. So you can read more about DNAT, dynamic NAT, and see how you can configure it on your deployment. That's all I have, Phil. I think I covered everything on the GWN7000. If you have any questions, we'll stick around for a bit to answer them. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us for this webinar. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Fareed. If you guys have any questions, now's a good time to shoot them over. At the moment, it looks like we answered pretty much all the questions that did come in. Let me read through one of these here. Yeah, send over those questions if you've got any. It looks like everything that that's come in so far, we've pretty much addressed. Marty's asking if we ever plan to start up our own DNS. Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not.
We have a Grandstream DNS.
Yeah.
We have a stun that we encourage you to use for our phone, stun.ipvideotalk.com, but not DNS now.
Gotcha. Yeah, so if there are no other questions, which you can still send them over for the next couple of moments if you have any. But since we've got nothing at the moment, we will wrap up today's webinar. Appreciate everybody being with us here today. This webinar was recorded. We will upload it to our YouTube page, so check out our YouTube page. Probably tomorrow I would expect to see it, which is youtube.com/GrandstreamNetworks. We will also be sending out an email tomorrow or the day after, which will have links to view the recording of this webinar as well. So yeah, if you have any final questions, shoot them over. Just type them over to us in the chat and we'll answer them. But for everybody else, thanks for being with us. You can find out about all future Grandstream webinars at grandstream.com/training center. We have some UCM training webinars coming up next week, and then a GDS3710, which is our IP video door station, coming up the week after. So check that out, grandstream.com/training center. And yeah, we hope that you enjoyed today's webinar, and we hope to see you again soon. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.